صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد. In the name of Allah, the most beneficial, the most kind. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight's program, we have day 2 of the Majlis for Wafat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Today's program consists of the lecture by our Honorable Samahat Sayyid Saleh Qazwini. At this time, may we please all recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the sponsor of tonight, Dr. Aziza, as well as for her marhumeen, for the marhumeen, Zaki Musavi, Malika Musavi, Sayyida Siraj Fatima. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Before we commence with tonight's program, I would like to run through some quick announcements. Spots are running out for our Sunday school as the registration or opening date for our Sunday school is on October 9th. So spots are running out. Please register quickly. Please see Dr. Yusra for more information. We also have, we would like to announce our academic night for incoming high schoolers. That is happening this Sunday at 11 in the morning. And so we have prominent guest speakers who will be presenting about high school, as well as a panel that will consist of former and current students. So if you're an incoming high schooler, if you're in middle school, please come to this event so you can learn more. At this time, I would be honored to be able to present and welcome our Honorable Samahat Sayyid Saleh Qazwini after allowing Salat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
أحسن شكرا حبيبي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتلا انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. For the love of our holy prophet Rasulullah, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
On the 28th of the month of Safar, we commemorate the departure anniversary of our holy prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, who left this world in the 11th year after Hijrah at the age of 62, and with the departure of Rasulullah, the revelation that was descending on earth onto the heart of Rasulullah came to a stop. And the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, the manifestation of the mercy of God on earth, who was Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, his life came to an end. And the death of the Prophet, the day of the death of the Prophet, is considered to be the greatest of all the calamities, the greatest of all the masa'ib upon humanity, upon mankind. In a hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says, إِذَا أَصَبْتَ بِمُصِيبَةٍ فِي نَفْسِكَ أَوْ أَهْلِكَ أَوْ وِلْدِكَ فَاذْكُرْ مُصَابِكَ بِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وآله. He says, if you fall in a calamity in yourself or your wealth or your children, then remember the masa'ib of Rasulullah. لأن الخلق لم يصابوا بمصيبة مثله. Because the creation has not seen a calamity as grave and as great as the calamity of the loss of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. The calamity of the loss of Rasulullah is considered to be even greater than that of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra and Imam al-Hussein and all of the Imams. And the reason, which we will explain tonight, is that the death of the Prophet was what led to the attack on the house of Fatima al-Zahra. That is what led to the persecution and marginalization of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Ahl al-Bayt, and it led to the day of Ashura. The loss of Rasulullah opened the door for those who take advantage of the religion of Islam, for those who are using the religion of Islam to gain power, and they ended up marginalizing the holy family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is why even after the day of Ashura, it is said that one of the daughters of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in Kufa, she's talking about the calamity that fell upon the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. She says, فَتِلْكَ وَاللَّهِ النَّازِلَةُ الْكُبْرَى وَالْمُصِيبَةُ الْعُظْمَى. She says, the greatest tragedy, the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein, and then she says, بِأَبِي مَنْ أَضْحَى عَسْكَرُهُ يَوْمَ الْإِثْنَيْنِ نَهْبًا. She says, my father's camp, Imam al-Hussein's camp, was looted on the Monday. My father's camp was looted on the day of Yawm al-Ithnain, on a Monday. Whereas we know that the day of Ashura was either on a Friday or a Saturday. The day of the wafat of the Prophet was a Monday. So she's saying, my father, Imam al-Hussein, was killed on Monday. He wasn't killed on the day of Ashura. What is she talking about? She's saying that the day the Prophet left this life, that's when the assaults and the attack on the family of Rasulullah began. Now someone might come and ask, why is the departure of Rasulullah such a great calamity? The Prophet, he lived a life, he was very successful, he was a great man, he has left behind a very good memory, he is loved, he is honored, he is respected. Why do we have to be negative? Let's be positive. Why is the musibah of Rasulullah such a calamity? The answer, my dear brothers and sisters, is that the death of Rasulullah and the death of the Ma'sumeen, for them, it is not a calamity. For them, it is being saved from this dunya. The hadith says, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min." This dunya is a prison of the believer. And once the believer leaves this dunya, the believer will be happy. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she became happy when Rasulullah tells her, you're going to be the first person who leaves this life after me. However, the masa'ib and the calamity is upon us. It's upon the ummah. One of the ways the death of Rasulullah is a musibah, a calamity, is because this great manifestation of God's mercy on earth, who was Rasulullah, he left this earth. Imagine someone who's so compassionate. Imagine someone who's so merciful. Imagine someone who's more merciful towards you than your own parents, than your own mother. And then this person leaves this life. Wouldn't you consider that a day of calamity for you? Wouldn't you consider that a day of tragedy for you? Well, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he was the most merciful. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Verily, we have sent you as a mercy to mankind. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It is out of the mercy of God that you became compassionate towards the people. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. Allah describes the Prophet. He was a person who, if he sees suffering of people, Rasulullah would not be able to sleep. Rasulullah would go through difficulty if he sees others suffering. Azizun alayhi ma anittum, harisun alaykum. He's worried over you. He's very concerned over you. بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. With the mu'mineen, he's kind and compassionate. So, of course, the loss of this type of person will be very difficult for the mu'mineen. Very difficult for anyone who felt the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. The mercy of Rasulullah was such where the adhab of God does not fall upon the people as long as Rasulullah is with them. This is why Allah says, مَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ. The adhab, the punishment, will not fall upon your people as long as you're with them. Allah brought down the punishment upon the people of Nuh, the people of other prophets. However, Rasulullah, as long as he was around, the adhab did not fall. This is why we see the suffering of the Muslim community began as soon as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi left this life. That's when you see the divisions began, and this great man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him as the man with the greatest moral character left this life. Yes, that is a musibah for all of us. Second, my dear brothers and sisters, the reason why the masa'ib, the death of the prophets, is a calamity is because of the events that took place after the death of the prophet. There were some events that took place that led to the downfall of the Muslims, that led to a nosedive after the Muslims had excelled under the leadership of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Someone might come and ask, How could a nation that was ruled and led by a man who was so powerful, a man who had all of the leadership qualities? Last night we mentioned the leadership qualities in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a wise man. He was a man who was supported by God. He was a man who was from the people. He was a man who spoke to them from their own language. He had all of the perfect leadership qualities. Why would the ummah fall after his death? Why would the ummah suffer after his death? Was it because the Prophet did something wrong? No. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi did not do anything wrong. Rasulullah, he fulfilled his task by delivering the message. Ya ayyuha rasul, balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik. And the Prophet delivered. The Prophet delivered. But we see that groups of people, they rebel after the Prophet. And this is nothing strange. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he saved his people from Fir'aun, and he crossed the ocean with them, where the ocean split in half and they all crossed. They all saw miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. As soon as they crossed, Allah tells him, you have to come to the Tur to speak to God. He leaves his people for 40 days. He comes back, he sees that they are worshipping a golden calf. The same people that were rescued, the same people that were saved, the same people that saw miracle after miracle, they started worshipping a golden calf. Look at Isa alayhi salam. Did Jesus ever tell people, worship me? Did Jesus ever tell people, I am God or I am the Son of God? No. Jesus never told people that. Jesus was a worshiper of Allah. Jesus called people to worship God. But after Jesus left, the religion was changed. Christianity was changed. Judaism was changed, and there was an attempt to change Islam. It's nothing strange. Why is it some people, they get all shocked and surprised? This is the sunnah of humanity. This is what people have been doing for hundreds of years. And we see that there was an attempt to try to change things around after the death of the Prophet. And Allah tells people this. This is not something strange for us. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلْ انقلبتم على أعقابكم. Muhammad is Rasulullah. If he dies or he's killed, will you turn back over your heels? وَمَنْ يَنْقَلِبْ عَلَىٰ عَقِبَيْهِ فَلَنْ يَضُرَّ اللَّهَ شَيْئًا. If you turn against your faith, you're not going to harm God, you're going to harm yourself. And this is what we see happened after the death of the Prophet. Today Muslims, they don't like to talk about the events in Islamic history that happened on the day of the death of the Prophet and the events following that. They talk about the life of the Prophet from the beginning, second day, third day, first year, second year, all of this, it's all mentioned. But suddenly, you don't see anyone talking about the death of the Prophet. Why is it that only the Shias talk about the day of the death of the Prophet? Did he not die? Was there not a day in Islamic history that the Prophet passed away in? Why is it that no one mentions it? Why is it that no one talks about it? Because there's an attempt to hide the events that took place in Islamic history. Yes. This is why, my dear brothers and sisters, as Muslims, we need to know the life of the Prophet. We need to know the Sunnah of the Prophet, and we need to know it from A to Z. And we need to ask ourselves questions. Because the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi and his Sunnah is contested. What does that mean? This means that different groups of people are trying to portray the life of the Prophet in a particular way. During the life of the Prophet, how did he pray? How did the Prophet pray? The Prophet prayed one way. Why is it that right now you have some, they're folding their hands, some they have their hands down, some are praying in one way, and third way, second? Why? The Prophet prayed one way. The Prophet didn't divide people. The Prophet, he had one way. But the fact of the matter is that there are narratives out there that try to tell people this is how the Prophet was. And this is how the Prophet was. And we see that the struggle of the narrative, it began to take place immediately with the death of the Prophet. One of the things right now Muslims don't know about is the day of the death of the Prophet. We say the Prophet passed away in the end of Safar. There's another opinion that he passed away in Rabi' al-Awwal. Now Rabi' al-Awwal and end of Safar, there's not that much of a difference. However, for example, another example is, where did the Prophet die? Today, there are two narratives. One narrative says he died in his home, in his own room, in the hands of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and there's another narrative that says he died in the hands of his wife Aisha, and in her room and in her house. Now, of course, we know that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, he describes, he tells us his story, he tells us his version. But Bukhari and Muslim, they mention that the Prophet died in the room of Aisha and in the lap of Aisha. He had his head in the lap of Aisha, and that's how he passed away. However, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib in Nahj al-Balagha, he says, talking about his relationship with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says, وَلَقَدْ عَلِمَ الْمُسْتَحْفِظُونَ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ مُحَمَّدٍ صلى الله عليه وآله أني لم أرد على الله ولا على رسوله ساعة قط. Those who know Rasulullah, they know that I was the closest to the Prophet. They know that I never rejected the order of God and the order of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. وَلَقَدْ وَاسَيْتُهُ بِنَفْسِي فِي الْمَوَاطِنِ الَّتِي تَنْكُصُ فِيهَا الْأَبْطَالِ وَتَتَأَخَّرُ فِيهَا الْأَقْدَامِ. And I put my life on the line. This is Imam Ali saying. He's saying, and I put my life on the line in the positions and in the places where the brave men, they stepped back. In the battle of Khaybar, who was the one who went forward while others stepped back? In the battle of Uhud, who was the one who went forward while others stepped back? In the battle of Ahzab, in the battle of Badr, who was the one who went forward while others stepped back? It was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. So he says, I was the one who put myself in line, in harm's way, for the sake of Rasulullah. Najdatan akramani Allahu biha. This is an honor that God has given me, to be the closest to Rasulullah. And then he says, وَلَقَدْ قُبِضَ Rasulullah. And Rasulullah passed away, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, وَإِنَّ رَأْسُهُ لَعَلَى صَدْرِي. He passed away when his head was on my chest. This is Imam Ali describing to us how the Prophet passed away. He says, وَلَقَدْ سَالَتْ نَفْسُهُ فِي كَفِّي فَأَمْرَرْتُهَا عَلَى وَجْهِي. And his soul went through my hands and I wiped it on my face. وَلَقَدْ وَلِّيتُ غَسْلَهُ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ أَعْوَانِي. And I was the one who was tasked with washing the body of Rasulullah while the angels were supporting me. فَضَجَّتِ الدَّارُ وَالْأَفْنِيَةِ. And I would hear the shock, I would hear the crying of the angels as they descend, and as one group descends and one group ascends. مَلَأٌ يَهْبَطْ وَمَلَأٌ يَعْرَجْ وَمَا فَارَقَتْ سَمْعِي هَيْمَنَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ. And I could hear the cries of the angels. As they descend, the angels, they say something. What are the angels ordered to say upon Rasulullah? إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ. The angels are ordered to send salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And then he says, فَمَنْ ذَا أَحَقُّ بِهِ مِنِّي حَيًّا وَمَيِّتًا. He's telling people, during his life, I was the one who was with him. During his life, I put my life on the line, and after his death, I was the one who washed him. I was the one who buried him. I was the one who placed him in the kafan. So, who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe Imam Ali, or are you going to believe the other narrative? It's up to Muslims to believe. However, we have proof. Salama, she says Rasulullah passed away while he was with Ali ibn Abi Talib. Furthermore, even the wife of the Prophet, Aisha, she says, we did not know that the Prophet was buried until we heard the shovels and the digging in his room. What does this mean? This means that she was not there when the Prophet was being buried. This means that it was Imam Ali, and he was the one who was the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So you see, there's two different narratives. Another narrative, another very important fundamental issue that took place, and there's a dispute in the narrative. What is that? That is, did the Prophet appoint someone before he died, or did he not appoint someone? Today, one group of Muslims, they say the Prophet, he died, and he tells people, Yallah, you guys take care of matters. I'm going to leave you. You guys are good people. You guys are great. You guys take care of who represents God. You guys take care of who speaks on behalf of God and who interprets the Quran. And then there's the narrative of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt that say that no, the Prophet appointed someone. The Prophet did not die and leave his ummah, leave his whole project, his life project, something that he worked for, something that he put his life on the line for every day in his life, so that other people, they could come and take it, so that other people could come and rule after him. No. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, obviously he chose. And we know who he chose. He chose Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. But there's a narrative that says he died and he said, you guys take care of it. We'll leave it up to you guys. Does this make sense? Right now, the Queen died 10 days ago. When she first came to power, or 40 years ago, 50 years ago, people said Charles is going to be the leader after her. And they know who's going to be after Charles, and who's going to be after that, and who's going to be after that. All of the kings in the Middle East, all of the princes, all of the leaders, when they come to power, they appoint someone after them. Why is it that Rasulullah does not have a right to appoint someone after him? No, the fact of the matter is that Rasulullah did appoint. Rasulullah told people exactly who's going to be after him. However, a group of people came, the establishment came to power, and they erased the narrative. They erased everything the Prophet did. One of the things that happened, one of the greatest acts of injustice which makes the death of the Prophet a calamity upon us, is that with the death of the Prophet, his sunnah was erased. The sunnah of the Prophet was erased. It became law, the law of the land. The government that came to power, they made a law that it is haram to write down the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Man' tadween al-hadith. And this is something that no one denies. Man' tadween al-hadith. The wife of the Prophet Aisha, she herself, she says, when her father came to power, he asked people, who has a hadith from the Prophet? You have a hadith, you have a hadith, you have a hadith, you have a hadith. Bring it, put it together, and it was all burned. No one rejects this today. Why? They say they give an excuse for this. They say they were afraid that the sunnah was going to get mixed up with the Quran. So in order to preserve the Quran, they hid and they concealed and they burned the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So Rasulullah did appoint someone. Rasulullah many times, he appointed Amir al-Mu'min. Today someone asks, how did the Prophet die without appointing Imam Ali? Why didn't the Prophet make it clear enough? He could have made it very clear, very obvious. The Prophet did make it very clear. But when you have an attempt and you do have for a fact, knowing that the sunnah of the Prophet was erased and eradicated, then obviously the Prophet must have said many things that have not reached us today. Right now, ask the Muslims, how many khutbahs, how many sermons of Rasulullah do we have available with us? How many khutbahs? Today, when you hear Muslims talking about the sermons of the Prophet, they always mention khutbat al-wada', the final farewell sermon. The Prophet, did he only give one sermon, khutbat al-wada'? Today, the Muslims, they only have a handful of sermons of the Prophet. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he led the Jum'ah prayer for 10 years. For over 10 years, he led the Jum'ah prayer. 52 weeks in a year, meaning the Prophet over 520 times, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he gave a Jum'ah sermon. Where are all these sermons today? What happened to the khutbahs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? They're all gone. Even the khutbah that we narrate of the welcoming of the month of Ramadan. This is narrated from the Imams of the Ahl Bayt. The resources that we have are from the Imams of the Ahl Bayt. That is what has remained, and that is what has been with us. So this is what happened, and this is the tragedy that took place. And this rule of man' tadween al-hadith, it lasted for 90 years. 90 years, until the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. He came and he said, that's enough. Now you could narrate and document the hadith of Rasulullah. Of course, during those 90 years, the government and the establishment, they were narrating hadith. Muawiyah was paying people to narrate narrations that go against Islam and go against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and adding fabricated narrations. This is the reality that the Muslim world went through. One of the greatest tragedies that took place after the death, or before the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, was an event by the name of Raziyat al-Khamis, the calamity of the Thursday. Why is it called the calamity of the Thursday? The Prophet passes away on a Monday. The Thursday before that, there was a great act of injustice that was done against Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Before his death, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he wanted Medina to be empty. He wanted everyone to leave Medina. And he has prepared an army outside of Medina to go and defend the borders of the Muslim land against the Roman Empire. And he's ready to send them. And the leader of that army is a young 18-year-old man by the name of Usama. Usama ibn Zayd. Usama, the son of Zayd. Zayd, the father of Usama, he's the only man who's mentioned in the Quran. And he was the adopted son of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. People, they started calling him Zayd, the son of Muhammad. The Quran came and it said, no, call him by his father. He has his own, to be the commander of the army. And he tells all of the Muslims, with the exception of those who he wanted near him, like Imam Ali, he tells them, you all have to go and join the army of Usama. أنفذوا جيش أسامة لعن الله من تخلف عن جيش أسامة. May the curse of God be upon the one who does not join the army of Usama. Why did Rasulullah want this to happen? Because the Prophet wanted Medina to be empty when he dies. The Prophet he sensed the troubles that are going on, so he wanted all of them to leave Medina and go outside in the borders of Medina. And he tells all of the heads of the Sahaba, even the elder men, he tells them, you go and you join the army of Usama. Now Usama is a young man, but he's telling them, even though he's young, you have to go and follow him. Why? So that later on they don't come and say Ali is young. Ali is young, because that is what they said. They came and they said Ali is too young. We allowed the elders to come. Rasulullah is trying to tell them that you, the elders of Medina, you need to be under the command of that 18-year-old. You need to be under the command of that young man. So here, some of them go. But there was some of the Muslims that sensed that the Prophet was dying. So they keep going and coming back, going and coming back. They don't want to miss out on the action. And on that Thursday, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he keeps falling unconscious, and he wakes up and he sleeps and he wakes up. And several of those men, they gathered around Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. So the Prophet, he sees them there, he tells them, go and join the army. They ignore the order of Rasulullah. He tells them, "Ituni bidawatin wa katif li'aktub lakum ma la tadhullu ba'dahu abada." Bring me something to write with and a shoulder, katif, because the shoulder of a lamb, it's flat. You could write on it. He says, bring it and I will tell you that which you will not go astray. Here, look at the disrespect that took place against our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. What do they say? One of them, He comes and he says, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَهْجُرْ يَكْفِينَا كِتَابُ اللَّهِ. The man is hallucinating. The man is delirious. The book of Allah is enough for us. Imagine Rasulullah, someone comes and says this type of stuff about him. These type of words about him. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he becomes angry and he tells them, leave me. There should be no quarreling. There should be no fighting next to the Prophet. And he kicks them out. He kicks them out. He tells them, leave me, and he kicks them out. And then Ibn Abbas, he comes many years later, he cries, he says, الرزية كل الرزية ما حال بين رسول الله وكتابه. The calamity, the whole calamity is them coming between Rasulullah and his will. Imagine, the Prophet did not have the right to tell his will. This is the injustice that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi went through, where they did not give him the right to say his own will. Every leader, every dying person has the right to say their will. But Rasulullah, that haqq was taken away from him. Now someone might come and say, why didn't Rasulullah just go ahead and say what he wanted to say? The answer is, if you've accused him of being delusional, if you've accused him of hujran, meaning losing his mind, what's the point of saying anything anymore? And even if he does say it, they go and they erase the sunnah and the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. This is what happened. What happened was that Rasulullah wants something, but another group wants something that is totally different. And this is the calamity that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi faced. And after his death, this is why the Muslims were divided, because one group of people took matters into their own hand and they diverted the path that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi had placed for them. This is why the musibah of Rasulullah is so great. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, we turn our hearts to Medina on a night like this. On a day like this, and a night like this, we turn our hearts to the city of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. In Karbala, although Imam al-Hussein was killed, but you see hundreds and thousands of people on the eve of his martyrdom. They're gathering, they're crying, there's masa'ib. Today, where are those who are gathering around the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? Where are those who are crying for the Holy Prophet in Medina right now? Are there majalis in the city of Rasulullah right now? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, in his final days and final moments, he kept telling people, take care of my Ahlul Bayt, take care of my family after me. أوصيكم بأهل بيتي خيرا. Do not oppress my family after me. He would stand next to the door of Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam in front of the Muslims, and he used to say, Babu Fatima Babi wa hijabuha hijabi. The door of Fatima is my door, and the hijab of Fatima is my hijab. On his last day, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he was in his home, he calls out, Ituni bihabibi. Bring me my beloved. The wife of the Prophet, one of them, she goes and she brings her father. He says, no, I said bring me my beloved. Another one, she goes and she brings her father. He says, no, I said bring me my beloved. Then Salama, she says, don't you know he's saying, call Ali, let Ali come to him. So Amir al-Mu'mineen comes to Rasulullah, and Rasulullah places his head on the chest of Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the lap of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Rasulullah begins to whisper in the ears of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he keeps telling him what he has to do. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. افعل كذا, افعل كذا, and Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I will do it, I will carry out your order, until he says something. Amir al-Mu'mineen remains quiet. He tells him, they ask him, what did he tell you? He had told Amir al-Mu'mineen, you have to be patient when you see that you are attacked and your home is attacked. Then he tells him, call for me my sons Hassan and Hussein. Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, they throw themselves on the chest of Rasulullah. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tries to lift them because Rasulullah is in pain, Rasulullah is dying. Rasulullah, he tells him, leave them on my chest. They're going to be orphans. They're going to be gharib after me, lonely after me. Leave them on my chest. Then he tells him, call for me my beloved Fatima. Fatima enters into the room. She sees Rasulullah, her father, in that state. She begins to cry and she begins to say, وَأَبْيَضُ يُسْتَسْقَى الْغَمَامِ بِوَجْهِهِ ثِمَالُ الْيَتَامَى عَصْمَةٌ لِلْأَرَامِلِ. She begins to say a poem praising Rasulullah. Rasulullah tells her, Ya Fatima, instead say, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم على أعقابكم. And then Rasulullah, he begins to speak, he begins to whisper in the ears of Fatima. He says something, she begins to cry, and then he says something else and she smiles. Later on she was asked, what did Rasulullah tell you that you cried? And then he tells you something that you smiled. She said, the first thing he told me was that he's going to die, and that broke my heart. And the second thing he told me, which made me smile, was that I will be the first one from his family who will join him. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi was in his room. His family was around him. He tells Amir al-Mu'mineen what will happen to him. He tells Fatima al-Zahra. He tells Imam al-Hassan. He tells Imam al-Hussein. And then there was a knocker that knocked on the door of Rasulullah. Fatima al-Zahra, she goes. She tells him, Inna Rasulullah mashghul. Rasulullah is busy right now. That knocker comes a while later and knocks on the door. She tells him Rasulullah is busy right now. The third time the knocker knocks on the door, Rasulullah tells her, oh Fatima, this is the angel of death who has come to take the soul of your father. Allow him to enter. The angel of death enters upon Rasulullah. He sends his salam, assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. He tells him, Allah has given you permission. You are the only person that Allah has given permission if you choose to stay or if you choose to leave. Then Jibreel comes down to Rasulullah. Rasulullah tells Jibreel, Ya Jibreel, fi shada'id tatrukuni. Do you leave me in this time of distress? Jibreel tells him, Ya Rasulullah, God sends his salutations upon you, and we were decorating paradise for you. And he tells you, وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْطِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. Your Lord will give you until you are pleased. Then Rasulullah realized that that means that this is better. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. The afterlife is better than this life. So Rasulullah gives permission to the angel of death to take his soul. The angel of death begins to take the soul of Rasulullah. Rasulullah asks him, is this how you take the souls of my ummah? He tells him, I'm going easy on you. I am much more severe on the others. He tells him, شدد علي وخفف على أمتي. Be more difficult with me, but be easy with my ummah. Take care of my people. Do not go difficult on my people. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen, he covered the head of Rasulullah, and the soul of Rasulullah departed his body. Rahim Allah man nada wa sayyida wa nabiyya wa Muhammada. That was the saddest day in Medina. All of the Muslims began to cry. All of the Muslims were mourning the loss of Rasulullah. But there was no one that was as sad as Fatima alayhi salam. She begins to cry over Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he begins to take care of the ghusl and the kafan of Rasulullah. He washes the body of Rasulullah and he wraps him with the kafan. Then he places him in his room, and the Muslims, one by one, handful of Muslims, they would enter and they would recite this verse, Inna Allah wa malaikatuhu yusalluna ala nabi. They would send salutations upon the Prophet. Then the Muslims, they buried Rasulullah in his room. Fatima al-Zahra, she came to the grave of Rasulullah. She sees that they have buried her father. She tells them, كيف طابت لكم أنفسكم أن تهيلوا التراب على وجه رسول الله. How did your heart give you the permission to pour the soil over the face of Rasulullah? She would go to the grave of her father. She would smell the scent and she would say, it's as if I smell the scent of my father Rasulullah. Ya abtah asbahna ba'daka min al-mustad'afin. Ya Rasulullah, your ummah turned against us. We are from the marginalized ones after you. صبت علي مصائب لو أنها صبت على الأيام صرنا لياليا. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك غافر الخطيئات إنك على كل شيء قدير. Now we will have a short latmiya and then we will do the dua inshallah and the ziyarah. تعالي وقفينا يلا ابدي.
محمد محمد أحمد محمد محمد أحمد محمد محمد أحمد محمد محمد أحمد. You filled this world with so much light. You brought us wisdom and gave us sight. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmad. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmad. You were the greatest of all the men. You were so perfect and the best guide. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh complete is the command of Allah. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. You were a mercy to all mankind. You were so truthful and so kind. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. When you passed, Fatima was broken. She was so sad and in so much pain. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. She would visit your grave and cry. Her face from her tears was never dry. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Oh Allah, grant us the ziyarah of Rasulullah and Al-Ahmed. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Muhammad, Muhammad, oh Ahmed. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali
Anyone would like to recite anything? نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك غافر الخطيئات إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة